Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and we have a great show. I'm really excited to have Charles Lear. He's written a wonderful book, The Flying Saucer Investigators, and he has been writing blogs for me for years. He wrote recently a series of 5 behind the scene. I'm going to get this wrong. Yeah, behind the scenes of UFO Cover-Up Live. It was about a series that was on TV, but behind the scenes on that, oh my goodness. So there's a lot to talk about. Again, he did a series of 5, and they've been popular on YouTube as far as the audio blogs, which he does as well. However, I just discovered today with the series of 5 that number 4 is missing, and that's totally my fault. And it will be posted in a while. I'll try to post it within the next couple of days. So now a couple of things. Let's see. Tomorrow night at 8 p.m., I'm going to be right here with Mark D'Antonio, and it's going to be a totally different show. I do the Everything Else show, which is usually topics that I like to do other than UFO topics, and I have done some interesting ones. One with a FBI whistleblower that spent time in jail reporting torture. And that was really interesting. These are ones I did years ago. One of someone that was shipwrecked basically for 86 days, and one on ghosts and all kinds of things. I've done all kinds of different shows. Again, these are topics that I find interesting other than UFOs. So tomorrow night, like I say, it's going to be really different. Now, Mark D'Antonio went through a very serious heart surgery years ago, and a lot of things happened. He almost didn't make it. And so he's joining me, and we're both going to be talking about our experiences. And it's a personal type of situation. However, there's a lot of things that are actually pretty funny that happen. So it might be entertaining for someone to watch. Again, that's tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Next week, we have Avi Loeb on from Harvard. And let's see, this week's blog that Charles did was UFOs and and the police in Colby, Kansas, and that was back in, I think I did read it. I think it was 1970s, I believe, when that happened, and I think it was 1972. Whew, that's when it happened. Anyway, we can talk quickly about that, and with no further ado, here comes Charles. Welcome to the show, Charles.
Hi, Martin. Always good to be here.
Yeah. Thank you for all you do, I should say. You do so much, and I really do appreciate it. But it was 1972, the latest blog.
72, 73, yeah. I think the actual police sighting, the sighting was 72, yeah. Good job.
and there was multiple witnesses. I love those police sightings. I mean, you hear skeptics say, well, they're no better observers than anyone else, but I kind of tend to disagree with that. I think they don't want to come forward. Look at Lonnie Zamora, wish he never came forward. Oh, yeah. I have one more announcement I forgot to make. Last week, we had terrible internet issues, and I had John Ramirez on, and I had a lot of people saying that they were frustrated. I didn't do the show that long and all that. And again, the internet issues were really bad. I was in my office location, and I couldn't hear half of what he was saying. So it was a very disjointed interview. And so he's coming back on December 27th to basically finish the interview. Just wanted to make that announcement. And let's move on. So I was just saying that I think the policemen are one of the people, along with military people, especially when someone's flying in a plane, they know what, enemy aircraft, they really take a lot of study in that. So these are what I consider credible witnesses. And I'm just making a point. I love the police officers.
I do too. I consider the police the first line investigators. I mean, they're very often the first organizations people turn to when there's a sighting in the neighborhood or an area. Especially, most people don't know where to report to. A lot of police have. I just wrote a blog about New Fork. And a lot of
Yes.
police actually do have the Newfork National UFO Reporting Center number on, at the ready. But yeah, very often the police throughout history, police have been the first people out there. And
Well, when I had my sighting back in 2007, I had no idea there was anything online. And that's what I did. I called the
yep,
police department
exactly,
because
yeah.
I didn't know who to call.
And
So,
generally because they're it's their backyard, their jurisdiction.
yeah.
They're like, for instance, the Trumbull County, Ohio case that was all recorded at the police dispatchers, and they had a recording of that. And researcher Kenny Young reached out to them. They handed it over immediately. No, oh yeah, sure, no problem. This is our business. This has nothing to do with Big Brother. So.
Yeah, yeah. So this series you wrote, the 5-part series, you kept digging into it and finding out more and more. And boy, is that convoluted when it comes to all the players in that. And I'm almost more confused after reading all that than trying to. I can't quite figure the whole thing out. It was, but why don't you? First of all, I do have to say this too. I was thinking about this today. When we talk about these characters, there's a lot of people that are new in the UFO world, and they may have no clue who Richard Doty is, Paul Benowitz, Bill Moore,
Well,
any
yeah,
of these people.
that's
So we have to keep that in mind.
well, that's a real issue. When I wrote this piece, I was like, you know what? I got to kind of put ufology 101 on the back burner, and just I wrote it for people who are a little more familiar with this stuff.
Yeah.
And it was an exploration of mine. I was the one exploring. I wanted to like really look into this and know about this. And I do keep the newcomers in mind most of the time. To some extent kept them in mind during this, trying to explain who these people were and the backstory. But it, like you said, it's super convoluted, and it's also a lot of stuff that if you didn't grow up, if you weren't around during the 80s and then into the 90s, um, you this stuff back then, this stuff was all over the place. This stuff dominated. Roswell, a 1947 case, pretty much the entire 80s slammed down our throats to the point where, us folks who went through it, we're sick to death of Roswell. We're done with it. Much like I'm sure this generation is pretty much done with To the Stars Academy and the New York Times article. And, it's had enough. It sucked the life out of ufology. But so in writing the blog, I realized that, well, the series, what's funny is I thought it was going to be 2 parts, maybe 3 parts, and it ended up being 5. And even that, still, it was difficult to dig in deep. And I think it's probably better if it's better read, I think, than listened to, because I'm sure there's a lot of stuff you got to read twice. But it's more of a guide for the anybody who's interested in all this stuff to look into it themselves. I've got links to all the pertinent documents. So somebody who's really interested in the question that I was interested in, which I'll get to in a moment, can look into this for themselves and make their own decisions. I was also, careful to say, look, this is a speculation. It's a thought experiment. I'm trying to find this. I'm looking at it from the point of view of parsimony, the simplest explanation. If you've got two, different arguments, the simplest explanation is usually the answer. So anyway, with that being said, what I was looking into, there was this show called UFO Cover-Up ? Live ! No, UFO Cover-Up ? Live ! And it was a pretty ridiculous show with a lot of outrageous claims. and in the end had two shadowy figures, government insiders, Falcon and Condor, talking about an alien that was part of an exchange program, and the kicker was Falcon saying that this alien liked to
EBE, right? Was
yeah,
that
yeah, EBE. This EBE liked ancient Tibetan music, and strawberry ice cream was its favorite snack. So, um, and you also had, it was pretty much a showcase for William Moore, Stanton Friedman, and Jamie Chandray uh, for their around the MJ12 documents. And Stanton Friedman actually said on air that they have proof that there actually was a crash at Roswell and that there were aliens recovered and that they did autopsies on them. So, which has turned out not to be the case. The proof is, it turns out the documents are almost certainly fake. The MJ12 documents, which was a series of 8 documents Jamie Chandray received with a Albuquerque postmark in his mailbox on film. So you don't even have the original documents. And then when you look at the documents themselves, they're crazy. But anyway, in order to, these characters, characters of Condor and Falcon, the mysterious government insiders in shadow, pretty much people are convinced that this was Richard Doty, infamous self-proclaimed CIA-trained Air Force Office of Special Investigations disinformation agent working on behalf of the AFSOI and the CIA to spread confusion among UFO researchers via William Moore, co-author with Charles Berlitz and Stanton Friedman in the background doing research on the Roswell incident. And prior to that, co-author with Charles Berlitz on the Philadelphia experiment. And Robert Collins was supposedly Condor. Collins, I think, was another AFOSI guy. So in order to, the accusations have come up that this show was used as part of a government disinformation program to spread these ridiculous stories around the UFO community and confuse all us researchers. And it certainly did. People were extremely confused, and a lot of time was spent looking at the claims, figuring out who Condor and Falcon were, whether the MJ12 documents were real, and what was there truth to the fact that the Air Force was operating an actual disinformation campaign, which had been, it's a constant from ufology way back in the day. So I wanted to look into the idea that Richard Doty was acting on his own, maybe in concert with Robert Collins, and that Bill Moore kind of looked the other way on a lot of stuff and kind of took the MJ12 documents, didn't look into them, basically kind of they were doing him more of a favor if he considered them real and presented them as real. It certainly would help his book sales and anything else he wanted to do in terms of writing. So I also looked into the idea that he was somewhat culpable in this, and that UFO Cover-Up Live wasn't a disinformation program so much as it was a train wreck. So that's I began with those ideas in mind.
You talk about that too, and that was really something. I remember you talked about the.
Yeah, it went badly.
So there's, I think I'm having another issue with my internet.
Okay. Well, I'll try to fill in the gaps if I can. So in order to begin, uh, I wanted to establish the credibility of both Doty and Moore. Um, and so starting with William Moore, prior to all the Roswell stuff, was a co-author with Charles Berlitz on the book The Philadelphia Experiment. And the Philadelphia Experiment is basically centered around an episode. This guy, Carlos Allende, this gets really difficult. So I need my notes. Here we go. Carlos Allende. Wait a minute. Yeah, okay, that's part 2. Give me a moment. Boom.
Well, while you're doing that, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we're all good.
Unfortunately, I'm at a different location. I'm having a little bit of issues still. It's possible it's my computer. It's something I'm going to look into right away. But I just wanted to say a little bit about Doty. For it seems to me that you sort of uncovered that he may have been working on his own. His last few years of service, he was working basically in the food part of whatever it was, food service, which is really unusual if he really did have a high position. And he received no, when he was a police officer, he just seemed like he was treated like every other person, not someone that would have been in some type of intelligence. So it does look a little iffy. And I had him scheduled for a show about 5 or 6 years ago. And I said to him, and by the way, Alejandro Rojas was pretty upset. He said that I was going to have him on the show. He said, "Don't give that guy any airtime. He's a liar." That's basically what he said. And so I hope I don't get sued for saying that. But anyway, the thing of it is he's glorified in all these movies.
Stephen Greer, he was just in Stephen Greer's film, continuing his aliens and ice cream spiel. I don't know if
strawberry ice cream.
Yeah. But that's the other thing. So I'm looking into the credibility of Moore and Doty. I'll get to Doty in a second. But the story with Moore, the Philadelphia experiment, there was an experiment in the Philadelphia Navy Yard where a U.S. Navy ship was instantly transported from its dock in Philadelphia to a dock in the Norfolk, Newport News, Portsmouth area, Virginia, basically. So these quotes are from a letter from Carl Allen to Morris K. Jessup, who was a famous researcher, and they were the genesis of the story that Moore and Berlitz supported with anecdotal and circumstantial evidence. So if you read the Philadelphia experiment, it's basically Carl Allen, also known as Carlos Allende, is the main source for this story. This guy came forward in 1969. He walked to the headquarters of the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, Jim and Coral Lorenzen's group, in Arizona, and he confessed that the letters were a hoax. And this was reported in the July-August 1969 APRO Bulletin. When I was down at the Gray Barker collection, the Harrison Clarksburg Public Library, David Halchin, the curator there, gave me a paper that he wrote up, basically an article, an essay that he wrote up about this whole thing, because Gray Barker and Jim Moseley also got involved. Moseley found Carl Allen, and Barker convinced him to come to Clarksburg, West Virginia, and he went on tape basically saying he made a lot of stuff up. He kind of rambled. He kind of hedged around, whether the story is true or not. But there's a lot of evidence out there. A lot of people have looked into this. Aaron Golias did a great, who does the Saucer Life. He did a great few episodes on Carlos Allende, Carl Allen, and it's basically been established this guy liked to make stuff up. He even faked a heart attack so well that paramedics had to check him 3 times as a youngster. And his whole family just says, yeah, this guy just loves to make stuff up. It's like pathological. So this is somebody that William Moore got behind because it sold a good story. So that kind of looks at Moore's credibility. And then Doty, who we were just talking about, his Air Force service records can be found online. It's not easily, which is kind of, I think, a bit of it doesn't really reflect well on the UFO community that these were so hard for me to find. I found them on UFOs documenting the evidence. That's a blogspot. So that's the title, UFOs documenting the evidence on blogspot.com. And his Air Force service records are there. And they clearly show this guy was in law enforcement with the Air Force. He worked himself up from being a gate guard and Wiesbaden Air Base in Germany up to being a detective with the Air Force Office of Special Intelligence. One of his former commanders was actually quoted as calling him his drug guy. So it seems he was the guy that looked into drug issues. But his whole career, even after the Air Force, was in law enforcement. However, his last 2 years, I think it was almost 2 years of service right before he retired, his records show him in food services. And Philip Klass looked into this, arch skeptic who, has
a little rough around the edges.
Yeah. But in this case, I looked at Klass because he was extremely concise in his reporting of the episodes around Doty and Moore. Basically, he specified that Doty was working as the manager of the officers' mess at Kirtland Air Force Base. So it just doesn't seem like the career trajectory of a CIA trained disinformation agent. Not to mention the fact that Doty has been, publicly proclaimed this in a public forum. You'd think somebody in that position would have had to take a secrecy oath. So he'd be violating a secrecy oath. Unfortunately, the Air Force has never come forward, nor has anybody else saying, yeah, Doty worked for us, or no, Doty didn't. So, it sure, the argument's really good, but, maybe I'm convinced, but I can't say this is definitely true. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, but to begin with, so essentially punched holes in Moore and Doty's credibility. And from then on, Moore and Chandray, Moore is responsible for getting the MJ-12 documents into the public eye. The MJ-12 documents were received by a friend of his, Jamie Chandray, in the mail in an envelope with a Albuquerque postmark, which kind of points to Richard Doty. Richard Doty was stationed at Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque. Jamie Chandray is the guy in the middle. Stanton Friedman's on the my right, and Moore's on the left. So Yeah, on film there were 8 documents. 7 were the Eisenhower briefing document, and 1 was a letter from Truman to James Forrestal. So yeah, the first hole that was punched in, basically what these documents set up, there was a list of 12 names of this group that supposedly had briefed every president from Truman to Reagan. Yeah, I think it was, yeah, about the government's secret UFO program. So officially, since the termination of Project Blue Book, there was no government program. So they're saying there was a secret government program and that they had alien bodies and crashed wreckage, which was what Moore was pushing, along with Friedman. So this is the famous Roswell crash. Well, when they started looking at these documents, a lot of researchers, Brad Sparks and Barry Greenwood. Barry Greenwood, who you just had on the show with David Marler, Barry Greenwood's an old-time UFO researcher. He's been around for a long time. And Greenwood was the first person to get wind of these documents because of a researcher that was more kind of he was getting snippets of information from Moore, and he was sending in FO Freedom of FOIA requests trying to get information on this strange group of people and these documents. And so things started getting out that these documents exist. Barry Greenwood was the first person to start writing about this and really looking into this. But he also teamed up with a fellow researcher, Brad Sparks, and they presented a paper at the 2007 MUFON Symposium where they discussed the MJ-12 documents and Doty and Moore's involvement with them. Brad Sparks punched a hole in it from the get-go. The documents were received in late 1985. I think as early as 87, Brad Sparks found gross errors. Page 3 of the Eisenhower briefing document has a description of Kenneth Arnold's June 24th, 1947 sighting. There's a description of a recovery operation, quote, in a remote region of New Mexico, located approximately 70 miles northwest of Roswell Army Air Base, where wreckage and 4 alien bodies were recovered. Now, the gross error is that if you're flying, it's 62 miles, and if you're driving, it's over 100 miles. So Sparks pointed that out. So, this is a briefing document. You would think they'd have their facts straight.
Sure.
So there are numerous errors in these documents,
like grammatical too.
Yeah, that's the other funny thing. Yeah, and this is a pattern. Before these documents, there were what were called the Aquarius documents, and this was apparently that's supposed to be a briefing to Carter, and there's a teletype and an Aquarius document, and the Aquarius document is just pretty ridiculous looking. In terms of just looking like an official document. And one of the sillier things in that is the idea that a character, essentially Jesus, they not mentioned by name, sent to this planet to teach us how to be civilized, or to teach us civilization. So there were grammatical errors and punctuation errors in that as well. So for a briefing document, that's pretty ridiculous as well. So yeah, these documents ended up being if you look at them, I read them for the very first time writing this because I grew up with, I not grew up, but I've been through all this stuff, lived with all this for years, and back in the day I wasn't interested enough to actually read them. So now I've actually read them, and they're pretty damn ridiculous. So that's something I learned along the way. So now we've punched holes in Doty's and Moore's credibility, punched holes in the credibility of the documents they're presenting, and all this is leading up to this production of UFO Cover-Up Live. But another twist in the road is this group called the Aviary, which is part 4. And the Aviary is, you've got the names Falcon and Condor, which the guys who were in UFO Cover-Up Live. There were rumors going out that there was this group, much like MJ-12, of government insiders, military and intelligence, that were basically a UFO working group. And it seems there actually was a UFO working group. And Ralph Blum looked into it in his 1990 book Out There. And they were made up of people who were members of or who had connections to the military and intelligence community and had a genuine interest in the UFO subject. So, this is where I get to, people are people, whether they're in the government or in the military or in intelligence circles. There are people, as we know from people like Kit Green and Christopher Mellon, who are genuinely interested in the UFO subject and try to get information about it and use their connections. So the idea that there was an actual group called the Aviary was something to look into. It's pretty tenable. Well, it didn't occur to me that it occurred to me as I'm writing this, that this was at around the same time that this group started getting active, was around the same time as Project Stargate was running a remote viewing program that was started in, where was that started? It's a government-funded remote viewing program. Actually, the DIA, under the DIA, and it was the funding was eventually pulled because they didn't seem to be getting consistent, reliable results. So it was at the same time that this was going on. Not only that, the First Earth Army was going on. So this was the movie. There's a documentary and a book, The Men Who Stared at Goats,
Yeah.
and written by John Ronson. And the documentary version can be seen in the series Secret Rulers of the World. And so this involved people that some of whom were said to have been involved in there's a list of who this aviary might be. It shows up in Adam Go-Rightly's book, Saucers, Spooks, and Kooks, and it shows up in other different versions of this list show up all over the web. Richard Doty, Sparrow, Robert Collins, Condor, a guy named Ernie Kellerstrauss, Hawk. He'll become an important character in this discussion. Jamie Chandray, Woodpecker, John Alexander, whom I'm sure a lot of people have heard of, Penguin. And then there's Kit Green, Blue Jay, Hal Puthoff, we've heard of him, Owl, and Dr. Ron Pandolfi, Pelican. So these same guys, also a lot of them, I think Ernie Kellerstrauss in particular, went to spoon bending parties,
Mhm.
remote viewing. They were interested in out of body experiences, and a lot of New Age mysticism permeated the military back in this time. In after uh, the military's basic humiliation in the Vietnam War, there was a big morale problem. And I forget the guy's name. I should know this, but basically, the guy who started the First Earth Army, he started it because he noted that his that soldiers in during Vietnam, I think he counted something like 60% of them, maybe even higher, shoot over the heads of the enemy. Um, and he wanted to look into this and try and build a better soldier. And he went off and immersed himself in the New Age movement. And so, did all kinds of meditations and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and then came back with this uh, first, I think it was the First Earth Battalion. He had a manual, and this actually shows up in the popular version of in the fictionalized version of The Men Who Stare at Goats, starring George Clooney, with uh,
Oh, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, this is a time context where all these guys have this UFO working group going on. So what happened? What seems to have happened is that these guys are trading stories with each other, and because they're government insiders, they say, "Well, I heard from this guy," uh, and then all these stories started growing in among members of the intelligence community and the military who believed in things like remote viewing and spoon bending. Um, and these stories started taking on a certain credibility because, well, I heard it from, Hal Puthoff, and I heard this from Kit Green, who's, head of the UFO Weird Desk at the CIA. And so this seems to have been the aviary. Now, in terms of whether they really existed, uh, Doty and Collins actually wrote a book called The Black World Exempt from Disclosure. And, they claim, yes, there really was an aviary. And there's one part where Collins describes a meeting at the home of Ernie Keller Strauss that included Moore, Chandray, Doty, and John Alexander. According to Collins, they began talking about the ET who was an ambassador or liaison to the U.S. So, these guys are talking about this, but does any of them have any proof? Is there any documentation? Where does this come from? Well, Pandolfi, this guy, Vince Johnson, wrote an article, The Aviary, The Aquarium. There was another group called The Aquarium. Apparently, they had fish names, and eschatology, which is a study of end time prophecies. And in relation to people in the government interested in this. So in this article, there is also a list of aviary members similar to the one I just read, which is in Adam Gorightly's book. So Johnson interviewed Pandolfi. He omits Pandolfi's name, but has the code name Pelican. And he also describes Pandolfi's position at the CIA as a physicist with the CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology, who mans the Weird Desk, UFOs, etc., at the CIA. So it's almost certainly Pandolfi, and Pandolfi was described also. Isaac Coy did a thread on this on the above top secret forum. He called Pandolfi the successor of Kit Green as the CIA's keeper of the weird, working on the CIA's weird desk. So this is almost certainly Pandolfi. And according to Johnson, when he asked about the aviary, Pandolfi said, "The Aviary is nothing more than the product of the somewhat deranged mind of Falcon," that's confusing, retired, it's actually Condor, but deranged mind of Falcon, retired Air Force Captain Robert Collins. And he went on to describe how Collins was discharged from the Air Force after being arrested inside the security perimeter of the Manzano nuclear weapons storage facility. According to Pandolfi, Collins told his captors that he was there to meet the president. And so it looks like Collins was a bit wacky. So other hole in the whole aviary thing is, or an explanation where some of their information was coming from, can be seen in a paper by Bruce McAbee. He interviewed Ernie Kellerstrauss, Hawk. Was a lieutenant colonel, U.S. Air Force, retired, and he published it in 1985, and it's called Hawk Tales. Kellerstrauss describes getting information from Dale Graff, a one-time director of Project Stargate, the remote viewing program, about EBEs, one of whom liked to go to the beach. He talked about recovered craft and a book where all of this was documented. Kellerstrauss talks about Graff's intense interest in the paranormal and out-of-body experiences. So he's an open-minded guy. But an important thing that Maccabee wrote was in his epilogue. He said, "One other thing should be mentioned to put this into a special historical context. In the middle of the 1970s, the CIA established a top secret program to investigate remote viewing. Maccabee describes that some remote viewers reported seeing UFOs and tells the reader that this established a connection, not an expected or wanted connection, between the remote viewing program and UFO investigation. It became apparent that these two parallel investigations were welded together at a highly classified level." So Golightly kind of references this in Saucers, Spooks, and Kooks, essentially saying that these guys were getting their UFO and ET information from remote viewers. So the likelihood is that this was that what people, thought was this, highly organized group called the Aviary, who were passing along UFO information, insider information, and getting the dirt and kind of feeding it out to the public. And then for some reason, Doty is disinforming the public. It really seems to have been an informal UFO working group of guys who are interested in this, along with a lot of other esoteric things.
And they actually admitted, or a few of them, like Kit Green, actually admitted that they were part. They were part of the Aviary. Right?
Collins and Doty wrote it in their book. I don't know about Kit Green admitting that he was part of the Aviary, but I'm actually not too up on Kit Green in terms of that. But Kellerstrauss talked about being part of this working group. I don't think Kellerstrauss actually. Yeah, I think Kellerstrauss called himself Hawk as well, because this is called Hawk Tales. So anyway, into this milieu, Doty got more in touch with Collins and this UFO working group. So Moore and Chandray, as was mentioned here, there was actually a meeting with Moore, Chandray, and Doty at the home of Kellerstrauss. And like I said, they like it in Collins said they began talking about the ET, who was an ambassador or liaison to the U.S. So Chandray and Moore are privy to this, apparently, to this UFO working group and getting what they think is all this inside information. So, meantime, where the MJ12 papers likely came from is talked about by Brad Sparks and Barry Greenwood. And they talk about Stanton Friedman was doing a lot of research, and he's
Yeah.
coming up with names that he thought were likely people. If there was some group in the government, this is all pre MJ12, these are the people who this might be.
Hmm.
Moore is having discussions with Doty because they're trying to write a book together with Robert Pratt as the author. And Robert Pratt actually started recording phone calls from Moore. The book was, I think they started in 1982. The book kind of fizzled by 1984. They never got it done. But the idea is that it was Pratt's idea that they fictionalized it, with which Moore begrudgingly went along with, and they give a second. So Doty was sitting down with Moore, and Moore was telling him, well, we found this, we think this, we think that, this is giving him everything he found in his research. And then Doty would come around and feed him back what he just told him. So, and eventually in the form of the MJ12 documents, which Friedman actually commented, oh, these are all the names we thought they would be. Well, of course, because you gave them the names. So there's this feedback loop going on that Greenwood and Sparks talked about. They wrote an extensive paper that they presented at the 2007 MUFON Symposium. You can find that online. And so, yeah, they discussed this feedback loop. And so not only did you have this feedback loop going on between, Doty, Moore, and Friedman, you also had Doty with his guys, the UFO working group. So all this crazy stuff is just spiraling around.
One point I'd like you to talk about real quickly is the situation with the MJ12 documents. They were being Timothy Good was going to publish at the same time that Bill Moore was going to publish, and yet Timothy Good, they were having a press conference, so Bill Moore hurriedly put something together to make sure that there was an appearance that these were international, internationally known, because Timothy Good's in, England. So I think that is really quite telling. And the MJ12 documents kind of fit what Bill Moore was writing in his book about Roswell. So everything kind of fit together in that way as well.
Yeah, this is a class, Philip Class summed up all this. Well, one of the things that came up with Class, Brad Sparks, Moore actually made a suggestion, according to Class, that he told Brad Sparks that he and Stanton Friedman had run into a dead end. And Moore made the suggestion to Sparks that fake government documents could be created. This is all before this is 1983. The fake government documents could be created that might induce people to come forward. Sparks called Friedman, and according to Class, and was shocked to find that Friedman was for the idea. So Class, according to Class, he got together with Moore had a problem, because if he released the documents and they were found to be faked, it looks pretty bad for Moore, because he's the guy that would profit most from all this. So a good solution to the problem was when he met British UFO researcher Timothy Good in May of 1986. He made an arrangement with Good that Good could publish the papers in the book Above Top Secret, and it would make it look like both Moore and Good got the documents independently from a source or sources in the intelligence community, and the documents would also receive immediate international coverage. So Moore and Friedman were scheduled to speak on June 14th, 1987 at the 24th Annual UFO Conference in Burbank, California, which was sponsored by Moore. And they were going to reveal some very startling material. Unfortunately, Good's publisher decided to hold a press conference on May 29th and feature the book's MJ-12 documents. So Good actually had the good graces to tell Moore of his publisher's plans, and Moore had the scramble to release his copies first, and he got them to the media on May 28th, just one day before the British press conference. So yeah, that's that whole story.
Pretty bizarre. Yeah.
Yeah. A big guy that was really hammering on these people too, especially on Moore and Doty, was Robert Hastings. And he wrote a very early piece on this, and he really went to town. He went to town on Doty, and Doty had threatened at least one person with litigation back then. And Hastings called him out and basically said, if you're going to threaten me with litigation, that means you have to, in court, say that you were or were not an actual disinformation agent.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was Hastings' whole card.
Yeah.
So
played it early.
Yeah. So this is all the stuff leading up to this ridiculous train wreck of a program. And this is all the stuff that's swirling around in ufology at the time. And to this day, there are people out there that are still confused about all this, what to believe, what not to believe. There are people that, still will, probably beat you up if you tell them that the MJ-12 papers are fake.
I think Stan was pretty much thought he was backing them up all the way to, we had conversations right to the end, and he still thought they were right. He did all that research in the archives, and he found, things that kind of matched and stuff like that. But I personally don't have a lot of faith in them. And I think there are a few other kind of mainstream people out there that were touting them as real.
Yeah, like I said, I'm sure there's still people to this day, and Stanton Friedman had a lot vested in all this.
He did.
And had a lot vested in Roswell, which I've said repeatedly on numerous podcasts that that's a real danger in UFO research, is to invest so mumuch time on a single case. Because if things start looking shaky,
eggs in the basket, as they say. What? We're out of time. Can you believe that? That went awful fast.
That quick?
Yeah.
Wow.
Bill's got to run. So thank you so much, Charles, and really thank you for everything you do, which is a lot. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. The time went really quick.
It did. Happy holidays to you as well.
All right, you too, Martin.
All right.
Have a good night.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. All right, everyone, we'll be back with Avi Loeb next week. Tomorrow, Mark D'Antonio and I will be here at 8:00. So hope to see you there. Thank you very much. And I appreciate you all listening. And remember to keep your eyes to the sky.